All right, so welcome folks, and today we're going to get started with a little skill share we have for you on herbal first aid, especially in protest scenarios, potentially, or backwoods, or wherever you may be, that you might need to have quick thinking skills and things on your plate. So we're going to start this off with Mary. Mary's going to say a few words to us about the situation we're in and what we have going on. And she's a wonderful healer that is a good friend of mine. So I'm going to leave it with that. I'm going to unmute you. You're still muted.
Okay.
There you are.
There we are. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you everyone who's here today. I want to start deep gratitude that we kept our commitment, our soul contract. I'm very thankful whenever I'm in a community of people who've gathered together to talk about, promote, and encourage healing work. This group is particularly special to me because we are building legacy. We're collecting information not to hoard it or to profit off of it, but to share with the people. So once again, I'd like to remind us all, my marching song is right now the OJs. You got to give the people what they want, and I think it's important that we're doing that and for us to acknowledge that we're building a foundation. So in 20, 30, 40 years, someone that learns this today can take it back to their community. So gratitude infused everything about what we're doing today. And I wanted to share one thing with us, which was each one teach one is the wisdom that Spirit brought to me today. Each one teach one. And I wanted to encourage the people who are here to create low-tech ways of sharing this information. You know, if the internet's not available or someone can't use their flash drive or their smartphone has been lost, we can write poetry, we can make quilts, we can even create skits and stories that infuse the healing wisdom that we're sharing here today. And I think it's vitally important that we understand that these aren't just survival skills for protests in the streets, because all of us who are doing social justice work, we protest every day just by being alive and by standing up and saying injustice for one is injustice for all. So the protest doesn't have to be in the street, as many of you all know, seasoned protesters, for it to be real. And I think it's important that we encourage people that if they don't have access to Zoom or their cell phone is compromised, this information is thousands of years old. So we can continue to share it in low-tech ways and to encourage others to do that. And I want to encourage us all to practice what we learn. For the learners in here, I'm a learner. Practice what we learn. Don't wait for the next protest to practice it, because you really want to know your stuff. And recognize nature as your ally. Nature isn't something that we go to because we need something from it. We're a part of nature, and we are interconnected with it. And the idea that we're working with life at all times, and we're in that cycle, life, destruction, or death and creation, we're in a dance all the time, can make the difference for people who are afraid to practice working with plants or afraid to practice this information. We're always doing a dance with death. Every day that we live is one day closer to death, and death is not the end. So thank you all once again for being here. Thank you, Nikki, for having me. And I send you love, light, and all good things to everyone here and everyone who wanted to be here but couldn't make it. And anyone who hears this at any time beyond where we are gathered now, may all this be beneficial and useful to them and their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, thank you.
And Mary's going to be moderating too, so she's coming in from time to time when she has stuff to share. And I'm going to bring Grizz in now. Grizz, do you want to come in?
Hi there.
Hi. So good to see you. And we're going to get started this morning with some herbal first aid, but one of the things was is we didn't know where people were at with their training levels. So if in the chat, if you could let us know if you've had herbal experience or you have no herbal experience. We just want to see who we're speaking with, because if it's all herbalists on here that have some herbal training, then we can go a little bit deeper. And I noticed a lot of people on here, I do have that, and there's a small group, so we may be able to get some deeper stuff going. So please let us know if you are comfortable with herbs. We have an herbalist. Somebody said I'm an herbalist. So Greta, do you want to start us off with what you were thinking about herbal first aid? Oh, and I guess I should say who I am. My name's Nicole, and I train folks on using herbs, and I've also been a community activist for most of my adult life. So this is one part of my activism, is to make sure people have access to information that could be helpful in keeping them safe and well. So there you go. That's me. And this is our wonderful Greta de la Montagne, who is, I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I go by Greta Grizz, and I have been working with herbs in a first aid context since right after graduating school with Michael Moore at the Southwest School of Botanical Medicine in 1991. And I've been pretty much on the front lines of forest defense since the late 80s and into the early 2000s. I guess like my kind of biggest moment as a backwoods medic was helping administer the first aid clinic during the Seattle shutdown in 1999. So that's where I got a lot of experience in treating chemical weapons injuries and other injuries on the streets in Seattle. So my perspective is coming from a place of kind of burning out on the front lines, more like feeling like I wanted to be in the midst of the fray, but also like concerned for my own safety, and also feeling like I could be really more effective in fulfilling a role of providing long-term care to a populations that are marginalized and receiving inadequate health care and recovering from militarized police violence. So that's kind of like what I cut my teeth on. And I decided after the WTO protests that it was really important to get more people trained up in wilderness first response, because a lot of the situations we had in Seattle were people being more than 20 minutes away from definitive medical care. So I've probably put on about 5 wilderness first responder courses for medics with just a focus for herbalists at the end, or for people interested in healing with herbs. So anyway, that's enough about me, but I just want to give you some context of like where I'm coming from, so that we can dive into some principles today of like how can we as healers best support the various movements for change, rapid change that we want to support. So we could cover many topics today if people are down to move quickly. I was thinking maybe cover ways to create a clinic on the street, kind of like outlining a little bit more of like what those roles could be off the street and in like a base clinic type situation. Maybe I definitely want to cover the importance of aftercare and the important role that we as healers have in, listening to people. And like part of our role is to hold that story in our own bodies and to just like hold space. And I think that's a really powerful element right now in these times. Everyone is in a high state of anxiety on the planet simply because of the global climate change that we're experiencing, and food insecurities. And so, knowing how to recommend herbs that can be supportive, but also just the physical aspects of holding space. and encouraging people to learn more about self-care so that they can keep coming back to protest or march and resist. So if I could get some twinkles or thumbs up, if that's like, I see.
Yeah,
all right,
a lot of people. Uh-huh.
Cool.
Oh, look, there's emojis that you can even use. Oh my gosh.
So I guess, yeah, like I see really important roles being making tea, handing out water, being supportive in that way, knowing how to make a good electrolyte blend. And so we've been really putting out there, my collective has been, we've spent about 8 years developing what we think is a pretty effective herbal-based oral rehydration blend. That's a really effective way to support a lot of people who are out in the streets all day, yelling, screaming, marching, burns up, you need a lot of fuel for that. And so helping people be aware of that. You can find that recipe in the little zine that we just produced, which is linked in the Herbalism as Resistance Facebook page. So you can go in there and find the detailed recipe that we've spent a lot of time working on, and you could prepare that in bulk, and you could even put it in your freezer. You could put the tea blend in your freezer so you have it ready to deploy later. Just a thermos full of a warm, nourishing herbal tea that's got something nourishing like nettles and lemon balm, and it could be really super helpful. Another thing I've done is kind of focused on the organizers and finding ways that I can be supportive of their health, because they're often the ones burning the candle at both ends. And so I feel like we as healers and herbalists have really good skills and tools at our ready disposal to support those folks in the prime organizing roles. So
Quick
just
question.
Thinking about ways to be strategic there.
Oh, I just had a quick question. The link that you're talking about, which zine is it in that was shared? Because we shared a lot of things on that.
Yeah, it's the aftercare one that Dixie made.
Okay, so Adriana just put something up. That might be the aftercare one. Let me see. No, that's a different one. Let me get you the right one, and you can go on. I just want to make sure people have a link.
Okay.
To
Yeah. Sorry. It's also on our MASH clinic website. So apologies for not having that ready to go for you. But we can definitely
right here.
put it up there. Super. And then just I wanted to stress the importance of self-care, and the stronger that we can be, the stronger we can be for other people. So that's should be a primary focus anyway to support our own healthcare. But the more that we can share that with other people, the tips and tools and the techniques for staying healthy during times of stress, and encouraging rapid recovery. So, we're dealing with kind of an endurance athlete type situation. Like if I were to think about the profile of a hardworking organizer type, they have a lot of adrenal stress, and they're kind of locked in that constant fight or flight syndrome. So I've made a formula that I call the A-team formula, and that has stamina supporting herbs in it, and a Eleutherococcus, the Siberian ginseng kind of figures a central role in that. And I make sure I have nervines in there, and maybe some skeletal muscle relaxants. So that's a really nice core formula to build in your apothecary. And you can then add in specific herbs according to each individual. But I find that if I come to a situation where I want to set up a base clinic, if I have some core formulas ready to go, and I'm talking one for the adaptogenic category and one for pain, topical and internal, it's really helpful to address a headache quickly. And then, you want to have a section for reproduction, hay fever, allergies, maybe an elder formula. And then you can add in other herbs according to the individual. But if you have something that's core and ready to go in your kit, it makes it a lot quicker and easier in the streets. So, you know, lung teas are kind of like really good for everyone. So formulating a good lung tea and gathering supplies for that and having that cooking up in a quantity. So making infusions the night before and then maybe reheating it and bringing it out in a thermos or Cambro can be super supportive to a lot of people.
Can I throw in a little comment there? One thing we did to make it easier for ourselves with actions is that we had a little, we had a way to move our tea around. So we had something on wheels, a little wagon, red wagon, and we had our tea that we could just pull to wherever we needed it to be. And then we could have people administer it better. And that is one thing, is to make sure, even with a base clinic, how are you going to move it quickly if you needed to move it if you're in the streets? As we've seen from the news, what happens if you haven't seen it, it is typical for police officers to dismantle medic units in some way or another, or arrest medics. So that is a typical move, and it is not new. And expect that. And if it doesn't happen, great. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. And Lorna has developed a really excellent framework with the Herb Bus in Georgia, where they use little shopping carts. And so they've built little mobile foot care clinics out of little shopping carts. So having something on wheels is certainly very handy. So, you know, having if you are lucky to have a garage or a storage space where you can store bulky items, that's a way to be super helpful. Having a Cambro and a big cooler on wheels. So if it's a hot day, you can have a dispenser that's got your cooled electrolyte in it. You can dispense that in water bottles, or you know, positioning like what Oakland just did. They had little minivans kind of scattered throughout the whole marching route, and this was all thrown up in less than 24 hours. They had people with the back door of minivans and cars, vehicles open with water and snacks, ready to support the marchers. So that's a way that the herbs can be really powerful. We know that they work on so many levels, spiritually and emotionally as well. And so, you know, the nervines, and we can go into specifics if people are interested, like some of the herbs that I've found that can be, they're safe for practically everyone, and that I feel act as a very protective force, because, you know, the herbs just want to get into the world through these amazing opposable thumbs we have. So I really feel like we can be really strong conduits from the plant world, and help support the voices of people speaking out.
Definitely. So maybe we should get into just some like good calming herbs, because I think no matter whether we're on the streets or aftercare, would that be a good way to start, do you think? Because we could talk about what we've seen work. And, you know, in addition, you had mentioned bringing Eleuthero in for energy and adaptogenic blends. I've found, I used to do a formula for people who had to do a lot of meetings, where you were getting exhausted from meeting, or maybe you have to stay up and you don't want to do coffee. And I would put a combination of nutritive herbs. So I would do, you know, the nettles and red clover and all that, but then I would stick in some rosemary and schizandra, and that really helped to keep everyone more awake when they were starting to tire. Not that that's always a good thing to keep people awake, but if you had to, there are alternatives to caffeine that you can also consider. So that's the uppers, which all of us love so much in so many ways in America, but there's a lot more that we can do with downers as well in recovery. And one thing that you have to consider too is if somebody's been really adrenergic, like really up and going, and then you give them something that's even mildly down, they can sometimes completely crash because they've been barely holding it together. So know that they might get really sleepy, even if it's something that doesn't normally affect somebody that way. But I'll hand it to you, Greta.
Okay, so yeah, covering the adaptogens and the adrenergic stress, as Michael Moore called it, the adaptogens. And I really feel like having some herbs available that support grief is really important these days. Just the larger picture of the grief of the planet, the incredible amount of biodiversity loss we're experiencing. So I'll stay focused on the adaptogens for a minute, because I do think they are so important for the people, the types of people that we want to support. And so that can be supported through a lot of teas. So the nutritive teas, I would say lemon balm and wild oats, things that are really easy to grow in most places. Nettles are always in there, red clover for the blood purifying aspect. And from there you can add gotu kola or bilberry or raspberry leaf. So it's really good grounding in just get handy at making a good solid nutritive tea, and can help support just the athletic output of people marching on the streets all day, and hydrate people properly. Let's see, I'm trying to think of like what other strategic ways. I could talk a little bit about the grief herbs. So my three core there are hawthorn, crataegus, lemon balm, and motherwort. And from there you can add on calming herbs if needed. There's definitely different phases of grief, and so that's where I see an herbalist could be super supportive if people are gathering around a particular individual and support their family and make teas available to the family, share recipes for like Zoom balls, Rosemary Gladstar's recipe for Zoom balls, the little proteinaceous nut butter based snacks where we can put powdered herbs into there, maca, luthercoccus, ashwagandha, gotu kola. So that can be a really effective tool as well, just making a whole bunch of hand rolled raw cookie-like balls that people can munch on and hand those out as medicinal snacks, and keep a grieving family well supported. The luthercoccus has had some studies done on it in Russia. They studied their athletes. That was what led me to it, because I used to be an endurance athlete myself, and so I started using that herb more and more. It is a northern plant. It's a little difficult to grow, so but I feel pretty good about the status of its growth worldwide and how much it's being cultivated. So I feel like we can promote that one. What else about, so luthercoccus is more energizing, but taken long-term, it has a really amazing effect. And likewise for your own self-care, those formulas can be super helpful to take yourself, so that you don't burn out. Organizing and holding down a base clinic or like, the place where people are coming to resupply can be really, really exhausting. You're holding that space physically. There's security risks. There's communication needs. From an administration perspective, you need to be thinking about legal aspects of the injuries you're seeing, and potentially be thinking about documentation of injuries for potential future lawsuits. So, the medical node is pretty super and critical when large amounts of people come together. And I'd say we have a particularly strong alliance with the kitchen. Anywhere the people are making a quantity of food, that's another place where we herbalists can be super helpful and effective. So that runs the gamut from monitoring the dishwashing station and make sure that things are being done properly there, so we don't have an outbreak of gastrointestinal illness, but then also supporting the chefs in the same way, making sure that they have the first aid herbs that they need for their own health care.
Handing out masks, that would be like buying a couple boxes of masks to get out to the streets that you can hand out to people that might not have them, is a nice way to be preventative right now.
For sure. masks, bandanas, any of the small toiletry supplies. I always try to make sure to have some toothbrushes on hand to hand out to people, especially in an extended situation. Just some of those basic toiletries that are sometimes difficult to obtain. So, you know, if you have the ability to stockpile those kinds of supplies, that can be super valuable, even in, you know, that's kind of what we want to do in case of a natural disaster as well, is have on hand those sorts of supplies. So,
oh, and one other thing, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask or add one other thing. Another preventative thing that medics right now, or herbal street folks that are out there doing whatever kind of monitoring, getting together little spray bottles that have things that are 70% and over with either Everclear or isopropyl, but things that can actually be sterilizing areas. So if everyone's touching the fences in one area, we know we're in a very new world to all of us. So think about those things that you wouldn't have maybe thought of at other protests, as how can we prevent new clusters of COVID right now in the midst of all of this. So a little spray bottle is much more effective than squirting things in people's hands. Spraying is easier. So
yeah, for sure. I'm definitely soliciting my community and my network and connections to bring us their recycled spray bottles, especially like the good ones that have the hydrosols in them, and that, you know, the little spray nozzles that don't get clogged. So I'm fortunate to have a sink in my garage, so I can process and sterilize, recycle a lot of bottles. So at the beginning of COVID-19, it was very difficult to find the 2-ounce spray bottles, just because there was such a run on hand sanitizer. So I think production is coming back online. I haven't looked lately, but I was really glad that I had a box full of recycled bottles that were kind of ready to go and get sterilized in my dishwasher. So I guess the main thing that I would just say about that is, not everybody's role is in the street. And I just want to keep reiterating that especially we as clinical herbalists can be super, super effective supporting in a supporting role. Even making a safe space to come back to, like in a park. So if you feel comfortable, setting up a little pop-up clinic in the corner of a park somewhere where you have, or maybe a business owner who would let you use their storefront or even the front stoop, with just a place where you can feel safe and that that you have a good exit if things go south and you don't feel comfortable being that close to police violence. Learning all the different ways that you can tote around your supplies to be supportive, I think is a really good thing to be thinking about right now, how to amass all those supplies. So
definitely.
What else?
What else? So I think when it comes to calming herbs, we can talk about support with calming herbs in the aftercare clinics too, and what are some of the ones that we find long-term support for folks, or even short-term. One of the things that from my experience with both disaster clinics and these protest clinics, what some people need is not necessarily for you to give them advice or medical support. Sometimes people just want to come over and sit for a minute and unload what just happened to them. And so having that tea station somewhere where you can promote an aftercare clinic even and hand out stuff, or have somebody handing out stuff that tells where it's going to be, even if it's in the streets or it's at somebody's backyard or something afterwards, having a space that people can come and just be heard for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I've seen that that's been a huge help for people who have just experienced a big trauma, just to be able to have a minute to sit down with some tea, drink it, and tell you what happened. And you just sit and you quietly listen, and you don't need to tell them anything, but just be there as an ear. That's a really great role for people.
Yeah, even at calm events where we work a large event that are relatively calm because it's a festival or something, we find that having a little sitting area with a little, tea cafe kind of thing in front of our triage area can be really helpful to reduce the number of, first aid emergencies that come farther back into the clinic. So having a space where people can just talk to someone that doesn't necessarily have to be a trained mental wellness practitioner. It can just be someone who's good at listening to people and handing them a cup of tea and holding space, helping people stay in their bodies. A lot of people come in to that situation disembodied, and I think that's a really critical aspect of how we can be supportive for empowerment, for empowering people on the front lines of these marches, is by helping people feel their emotions and helping them translate those emotions into words, which releases it from the body, right? So having just like a chair or even a stool for someone to sit, maybe they sit on your beverage cooler or your, whatever you have. Always nice to have those kind of tools that serve 3 different purposes, holding the thing, also holding the supplies, but then also being something that's a physical chair that people can sit in, or maybe it's just, a nice lightweight rug that you can throw out. That's a place where people can sit and feel safe, even just for a few minutes. You can talk to them, listen to them, or more importantly, listen to them, offer them some tea, and they can head back out there and actually be in their body and be in their physical presence and not be disconnected.
Yeah, and one of the things that if you're newer to herbs and you're just a little unsure what to start with, just get some rescue remedy into your kit, and that can be a really powerful way to support people in a very non-invasive manner. It's an essence. It's not homeopathic. It's not it's not herbal support. It's an essence. So it's literally the vital force that's been captured, the spirit of the plant, into water, and that helps to bring calm. So rescue remedy is a really nice place to start for people, and use it on yourself first. Notice what it happens, or I've seen it, use it with my animals. Rescue remedy is something that really helps to calm down the situation when people are in states of trauma, or animals or kids, and you can watch it happen. So it's good to practice on yourself and your family first before you just start, going out and trying things. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to add that I agree that experiencing homeopathy on a deep level and flower essences for the first time in the mayhem that was the Seattle shutdown, and I was in a janitor closet in the main convergence space, so I really saw it all. I was treating 600 people a day, but I had a very profound experience of realizing the power of the subtlety. And I was so focused on this kind of first aid, like trying to meet these extremely powerful chemical weapons with what I thought were my strongest tools in the box. And it was a huge revolution of my consciousness to realize that and we were also supported by Karen Schwartz of Sugar Pill in Seattle. She was really sending us some amazing formulas. And I think you were actually there, Nikki. You or your 2 close friends were some of the first people that I administered we had one for trauma and one for pepper spray. And to have been struggling to find a remedy to help reduce all this heat and irritation, and then to administer this homeopathic formula and just instantly see all this heat drain from my patient was just simply totally one of the most profound things that's happened to me in my education as an herbalist. And so I really think that we need to step forward into more of this, understanding more of those subtle realms and really embracing the power of the subtle, and especially in situations where there's a lot of fear and grief. I think that we can be really powerful nodes for holding down the emotional aspect of trauma. So rescue remedy or a 5-flower remedy, and don't be afraid to make up your own. Terry Willard of the Wild Rose School up in Alberta gave a lecture some years ago when I was at a herb conference and really wrapped my head around feeling more free to experiment and allow the plants to come in and let us know, like maybe pink yarrow right now is a perfect flower essence for earth upheaval, apocalypse fears, just, you know, this incredible emotive time that we're living. So allow yourself to be a conduit and experiment in your own gardens, and when you're wildcrafting in the wild, allow some of those other plant essences to come forth. Rescue Remedy was developed over 100 years ago in England by Edward Bach, and there was different things happening on the planet then. So let's all together work to try to allow the plants that need to be have their beings expressed the most come through us.
Agreed. And, you know, talking about yarrow, I actually was thinking a lot about yarrow this week and vervain. Those were the two that really came up for me. And yarrow on the essence level for me is about protection and being able to stay grounded when everything's got there's a lot of upheaval around you, and it's got this really great psychic protection. And then, you know, it's even used, I thought it was really interesting when I went up to work in a clinic in the Northeast, where one of the herbalists was using it to protect at the cellular level while people were going through radiation treatments. And it was really helping through chemo or not chemo, radiation. So it protects, it's protective. So think about that with yarrow. You might want to sit with yarrow, see what it says to you. Or another plant that's really sticking out for me right now is vervain, because vervain is so good for feeling really overwhelmed. And that isn't on an essence level. This is more of a physical level with vervain, and it tastes god awful. So I'm gonna warn you all of that. You cannot make a big blend for the clinic of yarrow or vervain and think that the average person is going to drink that and say thank you. They might actually take a sip of it and spit it out. But if they're an herbalist, they'll be like, what are you talking about? This is mild. So vervain is super bitter, super acrid. And in Central Texas, we have 4 different kinds growing all over the place. I'm looking at one in the Pacific Northwest right now, so I know they're everywhere. I don't know about the Northeast as much with vervain, but it is something that I've come to find to be a very comforting plant in times of distress, to the point that vervain takes the angst out and it just doesn't matter as much anymore. When you drink it, it's just kind of like what was up here just kind of comes and settles, and suddenly you can keep going. So think about vervain, and I don't know if you have anything else to say about another plant like that.
No, I'd like to keep talking about blue vervain, because it also has become a hugely important herb for me in my apothecary, and I'm so grateful that it's popping up wild in my garden. It's starting to really spread around, so I feel like there's this abundance of it. I love its doctrine of signatures. I love the shape of it. I love those strong leaves coming up and out. And yes, I agree that the tincture tastes god awful, but I have found that mixing it with skullcap and what else have I been mixing it with to add a little bit of sweetness? Maybe like a hawthorn syrup is a way that I found or even just any like elderberry syrup. Everybody should be taking elderberry really frequently right now to support ourselves fighting off COVID-19. But I really feel like blue vervain could quite possibly be a really critical herb for this time right now. A body worker, I find that it is a really awesome herb to support the psoas muscle, which is it's our fight or flight muscle. It's the muscle that's engaged when we're racing to defend our family against fire or the cave bear. And I really find that blue vervain is working on a really deep ancestral level to support our physical skeletal musculature. I like to blend blue vervain with wild oats or skullcap as skeletal muscle relaxant, or any of the particularises, but I really feel like blue vervain is coming to the forefront right now, with yarrow a close second. It's really easy to cultivate.
It seems like we have another herbalist on here who's or a couple of them, but especially I noticed Lori keeps making some input. Lori, did you want to unmute yourself and give us some, did you have anything that you wanted to share? Because you seem to have a lot of knowledge and this is definitely a Skillshare.
So I still call myself a very young practitioner, even though I've been practicing for a number of years. But I found, I really like the comment about using what you know and kind of what shows up. And for me, things like the rabbit tobacco I mentioned actually just showed up in my yard one time. And it was right before I was going to a conference out in the West Coast, the AHG conference, and Matthew Wood was speaking, and he wrote an article about rabbit tobacco. Hadn't known about it before, ended up like a week before I was going, actually found out what the plant was, and it was just, it kind of just showed up, and I needed it. It's for grief, and neighbor of 20 years died, my dog passed away. I mean, it was like one of those things. So vervain showing up in Greta's yard, growing wild, meaning please use me. I mean, you really gotta watch for those things, the please use me. I have a whole yard full of mullein. I probably have about 30 mullein plants in the side of my front yard that people drive down the street, and I live in a neighborhood. It's not grass, it's mullein, and I've got 30 or 40 mullein plants in my yard. It just won't go away. It's only been there a few years. I lived in my house 20 years. It's never been there before. It's kind of those things that you really need to pay attention to. If it shows up for you, it means investigate it, use it. It's there for a reason. That's
Nice.
that's
Thank
my
you.
thing. Yeah.
I could see how excited you were, and I wanted to make sure you got heard. But yeah, if people like Lori, if you have things to say, please, this is a Skillshare. So this is for all of us to benefit and learn from each other. And I want to make sure that people know they're welcome to use their voice if they have something to say. Just get my attention. So I know that if I'm looking you over. But I also wanted to mention the whole wild oats. Vervain is one thing. Vervain, you're not going to get many people to just like it like that until they feel the effect of it. Oh, another thing about vervain I want to say is about heat with vervain. If you're dealing with a lot of heat, whether it's internal or external coming out, you causing internal heat to rise, the vervain takes heat out. So I use it a lot. I've used it in the South a lot throughout the summer. And you'll find that somebody will be outside gardening for a while or whatever. So I'm thinking about protests and how people are spending all this time outside. A lot of areas of the country right now are really hot. And that's another reason why I think vervain is something that comes to me because of the time of year. It's a midsummer herb. It's something that is all over the place, and it definitely takes that heat out and that feeling of being overwhelmed. So somebody brought up that chamomile's been popping up all over Chicago right now. And that's a really nice one too. And that's simple. And that's that's a big message here from all of us herbalists is that don't go buying a bunch of stuff online and trying to figure this out. There's stuff around you. Keep it as simple as possible. I agree completely, Lori. I could agree with all of that. Don't, just because we mentioned something and you're like, oh, I need to go get that. That's not necessarily true. I want to, take a deep breath before you go out and try to purchase this. First of all, it's not going to come to you that fast anymore because shipping has now slowed down. So this is all about what can you do in a simple way to support your community and what's growing out of the cracks of the sidewalk around you that's trying to support us and be there.
I agree. In my first aid trainings, I talk a lot about just, visualizing a scenario. Say you're in an earthquake in the Bay Area and someone has a hornet sting. Well, you go looking for a cigarette butt in the gutter. There's gonna be one somewhere within the block that you're on, and you can take that old tobacco out of that cigarette and, spit poultice in your hand, and you can have a nice little antibiotic poultice. So medicine is everywhere. We just need to look for it. And I really like an herb like chamomile because it has several different purposes. It's great for an eye wash. It's a nice calming sleep herb. It just has a multitude of purposes. So I try to really spend as much time as possible learning about what I call the crack in the concrete herbs that are everywhere. And I've been able to find plantain up near Siberia when I've been traveling in Asia. So everywhere I would set up a camp, I would instantly I start scanning for plantain, because that's one of my first go-to first aid herbs. It just has a wide variety of uses, and it's also widely dispersed around the planet.
Right. And, to add to that, I think one of the things I try to get people away from, that Elizabeth Brooke, she has this amazing book she just put out, Traditional Western Herbalism. She's an English herbalist, and she had a quote from Christopher Headley about learning a plant's virtues, and not necessarily just its uses and its indications, but getting to have a relationship with these plants and understanding the full depth and how they are as a creature, or not a creature, but a energy as a plant themselves. It's not just about how we can use them, but it's how we can connect with them and understand them better. And so I recommend learning their actions first. If that's if you're more of a beginner, then actions is a really good place to start. What are herbal actions? So looking at things not just as, what do I use for a headache? Because there's a million things you could use for a headache, and what kind of headache is it? Or pain, what kind of pain is it? You really want to look at the deeper level of plants than just use this for that. So,
should we talk about plantain a little bit more?
Yes, absolutely.
Plantain is one of my primary wound herbs that I use for anytime there's an intrusion in the skin. And, I use it more for knife wounds, and I'm working in my ancestral arts, the primitive skills clinics that I hold down, but also really nice herb to take internally for solving a wide variety of gastrointestinal issues, along with chamomile. If you can, if those are the two herbs available, like, you're good to go. You can do a lot with just those two herbs, and maybe you can find dandelion as well nearby. But I love all the kinds of plantains. The seeds can be used also internally. In Ayurveda, one of the primary things we focus on is helping keep the colon clean. That's a really important aspect for good health. And so the seeds are really helpful. They can be soaked in water and be a really excellent substitute for a marshmallow root infusion for combating heat. So when we are in hot situations, like making sure that the gastrointestinal system is moving along correctly is really critical. And plantain can be, it's not as efficacious dried, but you can dry the leaf and use it later in tea. I do prefer to use it fresh, however. So I'll often put a big jar of plantain leaves in a vase on my self-help table. That's one way to be super effective, is with a pop-up clinic, is to provide a little table just for self-help. So if you spend some time really designing and building an effective self-help table, that will allow you to do two things at once. So people can be coming in and using lotion or bug spray or sunscreen and self-helping themselves to a plantain that you've harvested and brought to the table, while you're, in the back end of your pop-up doctoring a wound, for example.
Perfect. Yeah. With the self-help stuff, it's really great to always have a buddy with you, while you're doing that, so that you can monitor the self-help station, because a lot of people, if it's a crazy situation, sometimes they're not that self-aware and they'll start coming in and running amok. And so to have somebody there that helps them to ground and just kind of guide and, guides them, or is doing triage a little bit, that's a nice role to have in the clinic, as somebody who's helping people to enter and somebody who's administering and sending them off with stuff, so that you have some sort of flow. So I'm a big one to be a proponent of buddy systems. And so that can be people who have different levels of knowledge. So if you have somebody that wants to help that doesn't know as much about herbs, or you're that person, you can team up with different levels of knowledge of folks to put them in the appropriate positions as an affinity group or clinic type area.
Yeah, really great way to train an up and coming herbalist or someone who's interested, is to put them in that role for sure. Pretty important for anyone running as a medic to have a buddy. It's critical, and even more important, having an additional eyes on the situation to help you assess the scene and help be a lookout of sorts, and let you know when it's time to get moving. They can monitor the approaching tear gas cloud, for example, and so you can stay focused on your work, but that you can be safe and remove yourself if you need to. And yeah, just performing a security duty is really critical for a medic. So try to always form a pod. 2 is very powerful, but if you can get even up to 4 or 5 people to come with you and form your own little medic affinity group, you can double your impact, if not quadruple and beyond.
And we put up some affinity group organizing stuff on the Herbalism as Resistance for people to review. There's a lot of people training and that kind of stuff. So understanding how to create one is the core of this kind of work. And maybe we should talk about, and besides herbs, clinic setups, we were talking about maybe how you might set up different types of clinics in different situations. Do we want to go there? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I mean, the first one is, of course, if you're going to run into I'll do different levels of what I see is, first of all, when you think protest street first aid, you think, oh, I'm going to get my little kit and run out there. A lot of people think that at first, and that's where Greta's like, hey, there's all these other roles that you can play and ways that you can assist besides running in there. A lot of times the people who are going to choose the role of being the person with emergency gear that runs in are going to need to make sure that they are not maybe, they need to make sure they're the right person for that job. And what that means is, do you have any underlying health considerations that you're going to want to think about before you go running into a crowd? And this is also the time of COVID. So there's a lot of complications to this that we wouldn't normally have. So you have to really think about, am I the right person to be running in? If not, how can I support the people that are running in? Who do I need to contact to let them know that I'm here? Because that's the other thing, is connections. And there's what I see as something called Mutual Aid Disaster Relief that's doing a lot of really good work around the country. There's a lot of mutual aid networks that you can get in contact with and say, hey, here's my skill set. I'm not going to be the one running in, but I'm going to be the one sitting outside. Who do I need to talk to? How would you like me to proceed? So there's these mutual aid networks that are popping up around the country. So then if you're forming a clinic, we talked last week about maybe needing to take over a bus stop, or having something that moves with you. Like I was saying, having a little, now Lorna has also, she's with the Herbalista free clinic, and she's amazing and has tons of resources that you can go to her website and download and check in with her. And she has all sorts of stuff for people who are getting started doing this work. And she does amazing work in the Atlanta area and in Ireland. And so in Ireland, they actually have set up all of their clinics on bikes. And so you can have bike trailers or other types of mobile ways to keep your equipment with you, or to help people who are running in to refresh what they need. Maybe they need more chemical weapons protocol, or chemical weapons what am I trying to say?
Supplies.
Supplies. Maybe they need, water. Maybe they need whatever, but having that mobile clinic that can move around easily is really helpful. And thinking about also how to split up your supplies. When we did Occupy, and they had this one medic station set up, and I looked at it and I go, so what's going to happen when the cops come and take this? And they're like, that would never happen. And I was like, I really recommend hiding half that stuff in the bushes over there. So we hid half of it, and less than 24 hours later, they swept through and took all the medical gear. We had saved half of it, so we pulled that back out, and then they were much more, they were watching it a lot more, because I didn't want to say I told you so, but that's the kind of stuff that happens. So being able to replenish, don't put all your gear on your bike, with you. You want to have it spread out, and maybe in those minivans that you're talking about, have places and people that you're working with to replenish supplies, so you're not losing all of it if something gets taken out. We've had that happen in Seattle too, right? Like, I seem to have this weird memory about a whole bunch of stuff getting confiscated at one point, but we had to replenish. So it's just something that you have to keep in mind as you're putting your kit together. And another thing to consider is that you don't want to have too much with you. If you have to sit there and somebody's hurting and needs something, and you're going through all your supplies. I learned this from Mo. She's an amazing nurse herbalist medic that was the first person on the scene for Hurricane Katrina with her bike riding around, just, helping folks. And she taught me way back when I was doing a clinic in Philly. I asked her, oh, do you want to use our supplies? She goes, nope, I'm good. I have my little kit. And I was like, that's a really good point. Like, use what you know and make sure you can get to your equipment quickly and where it is. Because if in an emergency situation, it helps no one if it takes you to, 10 minutes to find the, water or whatever you needed. So.
Yeah, we're essentially talking about a go bag, and Seven Song has some excellent resources that he's put up and puts out really on a regular basis for what those supplies might be. I've done similarly, all the things that you'd want in your own personal go bag. Mm-hmm. Don't forget things to take care of yourself too. Make sure you put some snacks in there for yourself so that you can stay strong. But yeah, I just wanted to continue on that same thread, but also pop in there the just to be thinking about, as I'm looking at those of you who have their cameras on, let's really utilize our privilege as white females, maybe think some more about dressing up in the white corporate costume, and thinking about the power that we have there to be untouchable, and really use that and work it. I think this is the moment for those kinds of costumes, and to get, if you are called right into the fray on the front lines, that dressing the part, not necessarily as a medic, which makes you a little bit more untouchables, with the an EMT style, we're wearing scrubs even, can definitely create a zone of safety around you, and being serious about what you're doing. I think there's an incredible protective field that can be established around you if you're really working that. So I just learned a big lesson in that when I went to the Firesider trial last March. I really spent some time getting my costume on, and to the point that the guys at the security at the federal courthouse asked me if I was a lawyer, and I've never dressed like that in my life.
It was a costume. It was a costume, and it's important costume to play. I love it. And, I love the idea of scrubs, because you can get scrubs at thrift stores, and that's a really great costume to don on. A lot of people wear scrubs, and I've seen massage therapists wear them. I've seen people who work in numerous kinds of clinics. As long as you don't represent yourself inaccurately wearing them, but you can let people maybe that has some sort of additional value in front of the cops for sure, because that would look really bad to get somebody in scrubs knocked down right now. So something to think about at least. Seven Song,
I'm just replying. I think
oh.
Bella was asking, sharing that name and resource again.
Oh, okay.
Seven Song runs the Northeast.
It was Lauren. It was for Lauren in Atlanta, or Laren in Atlanta and Ireland. That
okay.
Yeah.
Herbalista.
Oh, Herbalista. I can get you the link. She's so great. So is Seven Song. I'm gonna get you the link. So do we want to do calming herbs, or where do people want to go with this? We can go anywhere.
We have another half hour, or do we want to start in an hour? Okay.
Here is the herbalista.org. She's awesome. I guess we can just do calming herbs if nobody's going to ask anything. Yeah. Oh, one of the things about this, somebody said they're putting a big red cross with duct tape on the back in front of their shirts and caps. That's great. I'm not a big fan of the duct tape necessarily. I like things that can be easily pulled off. Duct tape sometimes depends on where it is and such, but I used to do red armbands that I would slide off, because remember that if you show yourself as any kind of medical monitor or street medic or anything, that you're there to bring calm to the group, that is many times I have been chased by police officers. So being able to disappear when you need to disappear is also important, unless it's to also protect because of your privilege, as Greta said. And one of the things that really stuck out to me at Standing Rock was I was speaking to some of the elders, and they said that it was really sad to watch a bunch of white folks walk up, and then as soon as it got hard, they ran away and left people on the front lines that were elders. And so that's one thing we want to make sure of, is that if you do have the privilege, don't just, disappear when the going gets tough for people who don't have as much. So just want to throw that out there. Something to think about, at least. That's complicated and something to think about. So let's see. We have pre-packed bags. Not every situation is going to be a clinic or the daylight. Yes. So you have to think about you're going to act. Always having a flashlight on you and a Sharpie is good, and duct tape. And there's lists of stuff that Seven Song has. But again, think about this. The lists that you see, whether it's from the Herbal Free Clinic or from Seven Song or whatever, you got to think about what's going to work with you and what you're comfortable working with. So again, less is more in a lot of those situations. It's better to use things with confidence than try to be experimenting on people when you don't feel comfortable. And do we want to do then maybe what do you think, Greta? Where would you like to go?
I'm just reading Mary's comment about everything being portable or easily released, and that's just kind of giving me a picture of how I like to move and travel in the city. I always have a thermos or my mug, warm cup of tea nearby, and so and I'm not comfortable carrying more than 20 pounds on my back in a backpack. So I like to kind of have everything on my person, tweezers and magnifying glass go around my neck on a string so that it's close at hand for splinters and punctures and things. Lightweight things like irrigation syringes can be helpful. I think having a good trauma blend for bruises and bumps, like that can be a huge part of just helping administer some healing remedies to rubber bullet baton wax or horse kicks. So, you know, having a trauma oil on your person can be super, super helpful. And of course, always asking for consent and following our do not harm protocols. And I think this time that we're living in with COVID-19 is demanding that we have conscious, clear, and concise communication, really critical there to have, especially with the social distancing. You know, we're learning ways to communicate that aren't physical. So we're using more eye contact with people, and we're having like a different way of assessing space and boundaries. And we're being forced to have conversations about whether we can enter that bubble. Hey, can I come close to you? So I think that's really helping us as medics and practitioners to really get more clear in our speech patterns, but also be more aware of facial for what we can see, you know, above our masks. Like I'm finding myself, I don't know if this is true for others, but I'm looking into people's eyes in a different way to try to connect with their heart. And one thing I feel like the left eye to the left eye has more of an emotional heart connection. So that's just when you're doing your breathing and self-awareness before you're assessing someone, maybe think a little bit about looking left eye to left eye and see if that impacts your connection with that human in a deeper way. But I want to keep staying focused on clinic setup. So just kind of keep cycling back to that. So Nikki was talking a little bit about the, you know, quick pop-up clinics, taking over a bus stop, seeking shelter. So, you know, we're always being aware of our surroundings. And if we live in a particular neighborhood, now is a good time to kind of start practicing by assessing all of your resources. I have the good fortune to be on the board of our local community hall. And so for years, I've just kind of been putting it out there like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could make sure that our kitchen is really up to snuff so that we could provide food in a natural disaster? And everyone's been in agreement, like, yeah, that's totally what a community hall should provide, is a safe space for cooking food for lots of people. And so now I'm starting to look more at the wellness care aspect. And so with this current situation with COVID-19, we're also supporting the food kits that are going out with fire cider and lung teas, and you know, just thinking of all the different ways we can get more medicine out in the hands of the people, and, you know, we keeping everybody uplifted at that same level.
Oh, and I do want to add to that, that one of the things that I found that's difficult in this time frame is that I feel like 20 years ago, I don't know, it was easier to connect. And now that we're all connected this way, when we're in a real life situation, there's a lot of disconnection and people not knowing how to connect in real life. So what's difficult is that I've seen that the medics are acting independently of herbalists, who are acting independently of the food people. And what we need is to find a way to bring all the aspects that support our communities together. So if it's about building trust in communities outside of yourself too, that you might not know as well, but reaching out and keep reaching out to different places. And it's going to be uncomfortable, but come to the community with a humbleness, and that you're there of service, and see who responds. Because as long as you go there with humbleness and respect, that's the biggest thing that I've seen has been able to build relationships. But unless we do that in real life, I keep seeing these disconnections. And so I reached out locally to a medic group and literally had no response back after repeated attempts. So I'm going to try another group and another. You keep trying till you find who your people are going to be that can connect you to a larger group, you know. So it's not always going to be successful, but I wanted to kind of put that out there, that we do have to reach out and just see who reaches out back. So
yeah, another just organizing 101, some frameworks that I want to continue to keep bringing forward that we learned. The Direct Action Network really manifested some really nice models for how to form affinity groups and make sure that you get consensus training, just building up this ongoing narrative of this incredible organizing history we have coming from behind us. Medics need to be really aware of the 6 disciplines and making sure that you are in contact with the people holding down the kitchen, the people that might be in charge of running the legal situation for protesters, because some of your testimony could be important, or just the injuries that you've witnessed can be super helpful. So finding out who those people are so that you can upload information there can be incredibly effective. Also media is always going to want to know what kind of injuries you're seeing there on the streets, and so uploading that information to the people holding down the media node is really important. So it all comes from this central spokes council, and each of the disciplines is radiating off of that central core. And the important thing is to find the ways to get that information to the core so that it can then radiate back out, so that more people can be in knowledge of what's happening real time, and also security and communication. So that's some of the nuts and bolts that we really learned in a big way during the Seattle shutdown. That was like super effective. We shut down an entire city by using this model. So I think it's a really good one to keep bringing forward. And we have this digital divide where we have a lack of information due to the, information has not come forward, because it used to all happen in zines and printed ways. And then with the internet, a lot of that information has not been recorded. You can't Google it. So trying to just be creative about ways to bring some of that strategic organizing forward, so that folks holding down a first aid scene can be knowledgeable about that greater, the organizing aspect.
Yeah, and I think Mary had something she was going to add.
Hi, everyone. Sorry it took me so long to unmute. I'm in chat doing the connection thing. Thank you. Everything that everyone has said has been really rich for me today. It's this great food, and I hope everyone here is getting fed, because we need that for things we're doing out in the world and supporting others to do. As far as connecting with people, I commented in the chat that I come from a community that was purposefully disallowed or not allowed to congregate or meet in groups. And there's a long history of people who look like me and other brown people and poor people needing permission to even get in a group. So anyway, historically in the African American community, the only group that was allowed was the African American church. And that was because most people, in many cases, long story short, couldn't read. One person may be taught to read, and in some cases, a white person had to be there to make sure there was no insurrections being stirred up. So what am I saying? The idea that the medics aren't really connecting with the herbalists because of this COVID thing had me think that, well, in our community, we have an eye thing we do even without masks. And I was taught it non-verbally, and my son picked it up, and I never taught him. But the way I know you've probably seen Black people do the nod. We'll be walking down the street, you'll see us do this real subtle nod. It was a way to acknowledge each other in the face of a culture that wanted us all to shut up and disappear in some ways after we had done the free labor. So what am I saying again? I think that you can trust the process, that people who've been allowed and encouraged to group up, now feeling disconnected, will find that language. Many people in these groups already have that language if they're from marginalized groups like who we call gypsies or Irish travelers, or there's so many different groups that we don't even talk about who aren't necessarily visually brown, but they are kind of like told to go somewhere and shut up, wherever. People who have to give each other clues. Just in certain words they use. So the other thing I wanted to go back to is what Greta said about the suit and the privilege that a white woman can get by putting on a suit and going into any room and people automatically defer to her, that I typed in chat that there will be, the way we survive is that there's one person like the minister who had the permission. That's why you see it in Al Sharpton's and Jesse Jackson's, because historically they've had permission to speak to us in groups as opposed to us doing our own public speaking. So that suit wearing situation that Greta brought up, I thought, that makes a lot of sense. Where someone who puts on a suit who doesn't look at all like me can float between these different groups and have a subtle, we used to use colors, I don't know. I don't want to put that all out there because we need something that we can talk about when we're not on this call. God knows where this recording is going to go. But I want to bring that awareness back to us that, yeah, we can have one person who floats around, who's allowed to go here and there and everywhere. I also want to speak to chat. Cricket, thank you so much for inviting us to get information from you. And I was about to, Cricket said, what about connecting? Let's find a way to share email. And I was going to suggest people who don't want to put their email in the chat room can write Cricket directly, privately through chat if they want, or please pay attention. She put her email address out there. It's Terry, T-E-R-I, at laughingladybug.com. And lastly, with all due respect, we want to be careful of giving the beast, the matrix, the oppressive culture too much room in our head. We know they're there, but we got to dance between fear and caution. And I just want to put that out there and y'all will know what I mean. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat because years from now, God knows if Gmail still exists, you don't know what little 10-year-old, 12-year-old may be looking for themselves, looking for that piece, that clue. You don't know where that little crumb may lead them to help themselves and their communities. But I recognize many of us are cautious at different levels, and I love you and respect you for that. I just don't want you to give the monsters too much room in your closet, because the way we survive is by having moments. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Mary. Greta, did you have more to add?
Not necessarily. No, I think it covered.
Okay.
If I wanted to.
Okay, and so this gives us about 10 minutes for questions. And since we have a lot of herbalists here, please, or if you have anything you want to share, this gives us about 10 minutes to go ahead and work that way and just open it up to questions about herbs or types of remedies, things that you want to talk about.
Questions, comments, and reactions.
Yes. Don't be afraid. No, there's no question that is weird. Only if you don't ask, it can be a problem. Because this is the time. Nothing?
Well, so this is Lori. I just want to say thanks to Mary for her little spiel there. That whole don't let the monster have you, and we call that the tipping point. So it's the 49-51%. So whatever you think about 51% of the time, you're always going to tip that way. So watch what you're considering and what you're thinking about in that respect. And the thing that you can give that 51% of the time, it doesn't have to be 51% continuous, but 51% of the time, it will always tip the scale that way.
I like that. That's a nice point. We need that. So that's one of the things about being on the streets or supporting the streets. You need to be in a good headspace to do this. It's something that you have to think about sustainability for your own self as well as giving to people. And are you in the right space to do this right now? Where's your head at? So when you wake up, it shouldn't be that we jump on our Facebooks or our news feeds. It should be something where you're prepping yourself to be in a good headspace so that you can support. And if this is the kind of work you want to do, then it's going to take some work on yourself too, and not just getting together herbs and running out with a bag, which a lot of us did for a long time. And I can tell you it took me about 10 years to recover my adrenals from just running out onto the streets and doing whatever came up. So be preventative and think holistically about this. Um, so yeah, so I guess if there's nothing else, I mean, we can go a little early. We're going to, yeah.
Can I ask, I'm just wondering, I'm here in Victoria, BC, and I work at I do harm reduction for festivals and events, but I'm the only herbalist ever, and I'm trying to find more people who will join me. We're going to the protest today at the Capitol in Victoria for the Black Lives Matter, and I'm just by myself. And I'm just wondering if anybody on this call is living in BC that I can join forces with, because I'm always alone and I need a team. Like, I just don't want to have anybody ever. Yeah.
That's a really good question. Is there anyone here from BC? I don't know. I would say that one of the things to do is also, even if it's a family member or a friend that isn't necessarily into what you're doing, just having somebody there that is, and if you don't have that, then we definitely need to get people to be connected and find each other. But see if there's a mutual aid group in Victoria. Victoria is such an amazing city, and I love Victoria.
Yeah.
And so I would be so shocked and surprised if there wasn't a network of people there. Have you tried Pacific Rim College?
Yeah, I went to this school. A lot of the people I'm trying to get me to come with me are unable to work because they have their clients or compromised immune system. So COVID is really pushing people away, going into crowds today. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, let's try to see if we can't through that's why we were putting together this Herbalism as Resistance group and network, is just having people try to find each other that can support each other during this. So
thank you.
Yeah. And just, you can always direct message me. And if I hear of anybody, then I can try to get that. And I'm on Herbalism as Resistance. You can just direct message me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thank you to everybody who is doing this work. This is important work. And I think Mary had mentioned that we're honoring a soul contract. We're here Sunday morning. Some of us may have been here last week. Maybe you'll come next week. I think next week we have some guests, Olivia Pepper and maybe Carla Vargas Frank, who are going to talk about respiratory conditions and going out into protests as asthmatics or people who have some sort of compromised systems and like what to do to protect. Yeah, definitely connect with each other. And the one thing I'm hesitant to do is do too much on this, because this is an open platform. So if you want to send some direct messages to Herbalism as Resistance, we're getting on Signal and Proton Mail. And maybe we can even have a little Proton Mail group, because I respect people's privacy. So I don't want to be too open. At the same time, if you want to be open, you're welcome to. But this is something that's a public resource. So just think about what you're putting out afterwards, because we'll be on this. I won't put the chat on YouTube, but it is going to be an open resource for people to use. So there are a bunch of things that we've been adding to the Herbalism as Resistance group. You'll see there's an aftercare zine that a collective of folks put together. It's excellent. There's all sorts of resources for forming and organizing. And so we don't know how long this is going to last. Astrologically, I've heard that this is going to get peaking in July, and then something big is going to happen in August. Who knows? So this could be something that has many waves of different things, but we definitely need to think about this as a marathon, not a sprint, and keep breathing through it and keep being really grounded and centered about this. And yes, zines and getting things out in a paper form is great. If you have a way to copy stuff and get stuff going, that's really important. So Greta, do you have anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add, a bit about putting our face in the wind and walking forward with strong hearts. And if you have borage still growing around you, borage for courage. The cobalt blue flowers, take some of those before you go out on the street to support other people. It will fortify your heart and help you maintain courage in the face of the fire, and be strong, and like connect with your deep inner strength, and just know that you are walking forward with your heart and your best intentions to help heal people and to help support changing the world.
Definitely. Mary, do you have anything, any final closing statements?
I want to say yes to everything Greta said, and yes to everybody here today. And I appreciate you all for being here, and Nicole for bringing us to that delicate balance. We have to walk that fine line between public and private. And thank you for always holding that space for us. And I am very prayerful that we'll be able to continue to do this and connect with our communities and make a difference. So thank you all very, very much.
Yeah. And have a great Sunday, and try not to look at the news too much. Try to connect with people. That's going to be my final note, is just connection is key right now, and connection in a positive manner that we can grow with. So have a wonderful week too, and stay strong, and we'll be here next Sunday. So tell your friends, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, have a good evening or day.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next week. Bye.